Hello, everybody. Hello, Winnie. Hello, Beatrice. How's everything going in your house today? You know, speaking to everybody, Beatrice is so close to walking. She reminds me a lot of the kids. A lot of you wouldn't know this, but when the students have gym before lunch, they all try to sneak out of the cafeteria and get to the first place online at the lunchroom. And if I happen to be there before the bell, they all kind of scurry back to the locker room door. But if I'm not there, they're like touching the door, but not touching the door, and they're trying to lean away from getting out of the locker room to get to the cafeteria. And it's a lot like what Beatrice is doing now. You can plop that cute little thing on the floor on her 2 feet, and she'll take hold of the table, and she'll just stand there. According to my son, she'll just stand there and watch what's going on. And even though in her eyes, they can see that she would rather be over there, she's not quite ready to let go and take those steps. But when Winnie comes up to her and grabs her by the hand, she walks her down the hallway, and it's just a fantastic thing to see. So I warned my son, I said, you probably have 2 or 3 days of not chasing that child, but in 2 or 3 days, I suspect that him and his wife are going to be spending a lot of time chasing both of those girls around the house. And I think they will be absolutely thrilled when that happens. I do miss them. I miss you guys. And I miss everybody, you know, from school and from my weekends as well. Had my first time today to go out and do a little shopping, curbside drop-off. Did it very well. The Dryers Farm in Cranford is really doing a great job with that. So Mrs. Geiger and I were able to get some fruits and vegetables today and a couple of other things. And I was able to get a piece of cake, which is going to make tomorrow just a great day because I haven't had cake in like 2.5 weeks. So yeah, everything's going well. So a couple things I wanted to share with you is these things here. Over the weekend, I built and painted and just painted. I finished painting the owl house, and a lot of you might think, well, that's kind of ugly. And I would agree, I think. I kind of wished when I was painting this that Mr. Lonnie were here to help me get the colors coordinated better. But the purpose of this paint job is twofold. One, to prove that I'm not an artist, so check that box. And two, to kind of make this appear to be old. Owls have a tendency to be attracted to rotten holes in trees. And so I kind of wanted this to not look so pristine, because I don't think they would be attracted to a bright colored object that just happened to have the potential to have a house inside. But I think this kind of looks like it's been up there for a while, kind of abandoned, if you will. And I do think that an owl will be attracted to something that isn't so attractive. Does that kind of make any sense? But that's my thought. That's where my brain is going now. So as I made this worse and worse, I kept telling myself, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. Everything's gonna be fine. And this is on a swivel. It doesn't swing from the trees like this. This is on a swivel so I could paint it easier. So yeah, there's the owl house. I'm hoping we'll have some screech owls this summer. I've been reading some articles, and they say you hang one of these things in your backyard and you could have an owl in less than a week. So I think it's the wrong time of the year to get an owl like that. But I think I'll be pretty successful, and I will absolutely share it with you once we have our little owl in the woods. The second thing that I did this weekend was I built this Bluebird house, and it's not a Bluebird house, it's a Bluebird house. It happens to be blue. The gentleman who I watched online who talked about attracting bluebirds to your house and saving the bluebird population talked about how the color doesn't matter. So when he said the color doesn't matter, I thought, well, I have this beautiful blue stain, so let me try some of this blue stain. And if you look, I love the way it kind of lets streaks. That's not me doing a poor job. That's me admiring the fact that this is not quite a perfect cover. I think it gives it a little bit more used appearance, and if you, as you perhaps have looked around my shop and come to recognize, things don't have to be new to be attractive to me. So I did use a piece of antique cedar on the top, which should make a great roof. And of course it has a removable bottom, which I would show you, but I glued it shut by painting it. I'll get it open before I hang it on the tree. 1.5 inch hole is the correct diameter for bluebirds, I am told. And I'm gonna hang this on a fence, so I put some good sturdy screws in the back. Normally I would want to hang something like this with a French cleat, which is a unique way to hang anything. You can even buy them for picture frames in your house and things like that. It's a very sturdy way to hang something and a very easy way to make something straight on the wall. Maybe one day we'll talk about those things. But for now, this is the Bluebird house and the owl house, and they are ready to go outside of my house once the weather returns and I can get out there and get on a ladder. This won't require a ladder. It's only going about 7 feet high. I just thought it was interesting when I was coming into the shop tonight, and I realized, you know, I'm stuck in my house building houses, and that just seems, I don't know if there's any meaning to that at all, but I was wondering, like, if I was stuck in a boat, would I be building boats? But here I am stuck in my home building homes for others. Isn't that nice of me? And so there they are. I'm happy to hear comments from students only about how much they love this paint job. Remember, I am your principal. I don't need to hear from anyone how ugly it is. I need to hear from you how beautiful it is. And then you and I will be friends forever. This one I don't think has any problem. I think it is kind of pretty. So I was going to discuss real quick tonight the challenges that we had online, the tool challenges. And we have 2 winners, and we have one tool that I'm leaning toward giving somebody the win, but not quite perfect as far as one of the tools goes. So I think what we called the weird spike, or weird blade rather, this tool, according to Mrs. Healy, is a crown-headed grass spiker. Its job is clearly to make an evenly spaced pattern of spiky holes in the grass so you can install a chicken wire fence. That's Mrs. Healy, 7th grade English teacher. That's not correct. What is correct came from Dan Bauer, our own 8th grader, who said, "It is for harvesting ice or chopping it up." And this absolutely is an ice cutter for lake ice, to harvest ice from a lake. And if you think that sounds like a crazy thing, I am told, I have not seen it myself, but I am told that the beginning of Frozen 1, the first Frozen movie, there is a scene where people are harvesting ice from the lake. I want to go to YouTube and see if they're using this exact device, but that's what this device is. It's an ice harvester. Now, I've had this for a real long time, and I went to a fair in New York State, and there was one hanging on the wall of this museum, and I got the curator over and I said, "I need to know what that thing is because I have one of those and I've never known what it was." And he told me, well, I guessed, and he said I was right. Me and Dan, applause, applause, guessed correct, and we picked out that it was a ice harvester. So great job, Dan. And I'm going to call Dan, contact Dan, and ask him to come on the screen, and we'll have a little chat about how he knows so much, or maybe how his grandfather knows so much about tools. Second thing was the weird cube. And that, I tried to throw you off by putting my eye up to it, but nobody was thrown off. And in fact, Corinne Morrison, 6th grader, she told me correctly that this is a whole jig for installing doorknobs. And she's absolutely right. If this was a door, this would go over the edge of the door, and it would guide up your drill bit so that you could drill a straight hole through the door and you could install the door. And I don't remember what this cost, but I will tell you, per use, it cost way too much because I only used it once, and here it is covered with dust. So Corinne, If you're sure about this and you ever need to borrow it, you may borrow it. And I will be in touch with you too to try to get you to come on to the program. And we can talk about how you know things like that, which I find fascinating. Third is our spike. I only had a few guesses on this because everybody thought it was easy and nobody got it right. So a lot of people thought this was a railroad tie, and it's not a railroad tie. Railroad ties are slightly different animals when it comes to spikes. This spike is actually an alignment bit. So this spike would go in two holes of a girder, like a steel girder that you're putting together, or two huge sections of metal that you're trying to get the two holes aligned. So typically those things are held together with multiple holes. So this would allow you to get one of the holes aligned without actually putting a bolt through it. And then while this is in there, it would align the other holes for you to put the bolts in, to put the nuts on, and then you would remove this and you can put the last bolt in. This, since it's thin on this side, is easier to weave through those two pieces of steel as opposed to trying to put a single bolt through the steel, because when you try to do that, you might strip the threads off the bolt and ruin all your materials. So that's what this is. This is kind of a threading needle for steel girders. The last thing are these paint brushes. And it's Monday, so I'm feeling very generous. And I'm going to give the nod once again to Dan Bauer, who came very close and said it's a paintbrush used for lettering signs on trucks. And if you remember, this is a very specific brush, and I told you that it had a very specific use. But in fact, this was not used for lettering trucks. I assume you can do that, but these were actually handmade in a shop, and these were used for putting pinstripes on cars. And the worker would literally dip this brush in the paint and then would stand next to the car as it went by and not move the brush, but the car moving along would apply the pinstripe, and they would just hold their hands steady until they got to the end and then remove the brush. And then other detailing would be done by men and women using this kind of brush at the end of the assembly line. So this was a Pinstriper brush, but I'm giving it to Dan because Dan said it was a brush used for lettering on trucks. And I'm assuming that, yes, it could be used for that, but this original purpose was for pinstripes, which, if you don't know what pinstripes are, really thin pieces of paint, really thin lines of paint on an automobile. If you've ever seen a fancy motorcycles are covered with pinstripes, and even your dad's suit once in a while might have pinstripes on it. So that's what that's all about. So I have two other things on my workbench tonight that I was messing with over the weekend, and I'm not going to ask you what you think this is, but I've come up with something to, I was just kind of messing around over the weekend, and I came up with an idea on how to use these enormous elastic bands that I have, and I came up with a device that I think could turn out to be a fun game. And when I spoke to, and it involves a puck, kind of like air hockey, and when I spoke to some of the teachers in the school, Mr. Marks replied and said, that would be an awesome thing to have at lunch on those long lunch tables. So basically, the band on the front of this horseshoe allows you to push the puck. And it pushes quite well. And if you have a flat surface, I think eventually this would need some kind of fabric underneath it so it doesn't hurt the tabletop. And the puck could probably use a little Teflon on the bottom so it wouldn't scrape the tabletop as well. But still a work in progress. Maybe when I get it done, maybe Dan and I will sit together and bring Corinne in, of course, as well. And we'll sit and play this hockey thing that I made over the weekend that I don't have a name for. So tomorrow I'm hoping to have Mrs. Hetherington as well as a science teacher from the 7th grade. And until then, you know who I am. I know who you guys are, most of you. And I will tell you this, as I always do when I close out my meeting with the kids, parents may not be aware of this, but I always tell the kids to keep the faith and to spread the love. And I'm going to say that again tonight. Have a good night.